Monday, November 17th. I'm Scott.
I'm Rim.
And this is Geeknights. Tonight, the X Windows system. Let's do this.
Ever have that moment right as you just hit enter after typing something in Linux where before you even look at what you have just typed, before you even look at the exit code, before you even see the first return to the standard output, you realize that you have done something horribly wrong?
Yeah, it happens to everybody. You know, very few people do something as bad as RMRF/, but
True, but
you know,
similar things.
similar damaging things. You know, even if they're a smaller scale, like I accidentally deleted, this very small, not every file in the system, but some files I was working on or something like that. It's just like, fuck.
Yeah, I had one of those moments today. It was one of those where I hit it and I knew immediately, and I hit Control-C. And that prevented the fullness of what I had wrought. But
but usually, even while Control-C will prevent the fullness, very often doing a slight bit of damage versus doing a universal, damage makes it actually more difficult to repair, because now you've got to go figure out exactly which parts were damaged. Whereas if everything was damaged, you just say, it was everything, and there's a pattern to it. You can programmatically undo it.
Well, it
more
depends.
easily.
Some things can't. I was actually lucky in that what I did, I was able to mostly undo pretty easily, and I just have to do a couple more fixes. But so I'm in a server, and I'm doing some stuff with a wiki, a Twiki, and I copied a bunch of archives from an old Twiki, made some new webs, and I was changing the permissions, and I typed chown -r, recursive.
Yeah.
Apache to change it to be owned by Apache.
Yeah.
/ and I was about to type my
Why
path.
/
Because I was about to type an absolute path to a different place, because I was working from this run directory.
Uh-huh.
And then I hit enter just inexplicably, thus changing the ownership of every file on the computer to Apache.
Yep. That's a tricky one.
Luckily,
the worst part about changing permissions accidentally like that is that there's no way to know what the original permissions were.
Well, there is in one degree.
Or exactly which things change their permissions, unless you have a backup.
Well, to know what changed, it was really easy. I just did a find for any file owned by Apache outside of var www and proc.
Yeah, all right. So now you know which files they are, but how do you know what their original permissions were?
Well, the permissions didn't change. All that changed was the owner. And the group didn't even change. I just changed the owner.
Mm-hmm.
So basically a slightly complicated script.
It still could, it's still a game of guess the owner. I mean, the owner might be root or a user. Sometimes it's obvious, like, I wonder who owns the files in /home/.
Oh, see, well, here's the thing. Control-C saved me. It didn't hit home.
But, like, for example, if it hits, /dev, like, everything in /dev is some different owner.
It didn't hit dev either.
Yeah, all right.
Believe me, I was like, but when I looked at what I'd actually done, it hit a lot of things, like bin, but everything in bin should be owned by root anyway. That was pretty obvious.
No, sometimes. Usually.
Yeah, pretty much always. And besides, I have other systems that are built pretty much the same way, so a couple of things I looked, but there's only 2 users that could own anything anywhere, with the exception of things that are owned by RPM, because it's a Red Hat system.
Oh, Red Hat.
And I know what those things are.
What a piece of shit.
I fixed almost everything. But basically, because of one mistype in the morning, I wasted my entire day at work undoing the damage I had done to this server, as opposed to getting anything real done.
That's how those things go.
And of course, it was Monday, so we have our weekly, all right, everyone, let's talk about all the problems we had last week thing. So, of course, everyone knew what I did, so what I had done. So we sit down at the meeting, and it's the outages and alarm review. And my boss looks up, smiles, and says, so, that one server got messed up this morning. Rim, would you care to explain why?
Yeah.
And I was like, there was a problem with permissions that I'm currently resolving. Yeah, that was not fun to deal with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm just not so great today.
Did something fun happen at work?
I didn't go to work.
Oh, why didn't you go to work?
Well, I didn't go to work Thursday or Friday because they went to Puerto Rico and I didn't. And there's a thing that they wanted like to be done and ready to use today. It doesn't have to be like super done and perfect. Basically, we're just trying to hack together something functional so that this one person can do this one thing, and we'll see if that one thing is worth doing and worth doing well. We're just trying to make it, sort of happen, right? And I was supposed to make it happen today for reals. I got it mostly happening, but not all the way. Well, it's about half happening. And I was going to do it today. And, last night at like 3 a.m., I woke up and I was like, why the hell am I up at 3 a.m.? And then
Wait a minute. The story's going in a direction I don't want it to go.
Like about like a minute later, I'm getting all gurgly in the stomach.
Oh, great.
And then
Did you break the streak?
no, I didn't bargle, but I had problems. So I just like when it came around time to go to work, I'm just like, oh fuck this shit. I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah, pretty much. It's weird. I rarely take time off when I'm sick. Like, even if I'm feeling pretty bad, I usually go to work. Of course, that might come from the fact that until recently, every job I ever had, I lost vacation days if I took sick days, or I had a limited number of sick days. But
I also have a limited number of sick days. I'm gonna lose. I just lost. I didn't want to. I just lost a day that I was gonna be, sick around the holidays, but now not.
Wait, so you lost a planned sick day?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I only had 2.5. Now I got 1.5. What the hell? I'm gonna have to go in for like a half day or something.
Yeah, I still have my problem. I have like 16 vacation days I got to spend.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's the bowel-ular issues are pretty much the only thing that will automatically disqualify me from going anywhere.
Well, that's the main thing. It's like I got to get on a train. It's like, what if I have issues on the train? It's no good. And I'm still gurgly now. It's going gurgle, 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 gurgle.
Yeah, this worries me because I was a little bowely this morning, and maybe the fact that we all ate at the same restaurant. We'll have to find out.
There's the thing. There's a lot of foods we ate in common, and actually, it happens to me if I eat too much, and I ate a lot yesterday. So,
well, I'm sure no one wants to hear about your bowels, but my bowels, meanwhile, are mostly fine. Okay. So it's Monday, Tech Day.
Intestines.
So do you have any non-intestinal news?
Did you know that my intestines, if you stretch them out, would be really long?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I did.
All right, so check this out. I read this. When did this news come out? Oh, Saturday. That's not too long ago. It's pretty simple news, right? Unhappy people watch more TV. They did a study, and they found out that people who describe themselves as very happy spend more time reading and socializing, and TV, not so much. All right. There are other interesting facts, such as, if you ask a TV watcher, they'll be like, yeah, TV sucks, but you know what? What I watched last night was pretty good. So it's sort of like, even people who watch TV and like TV feel that in general TV is bad, but like the TV they just watch feels good. So the thinking here, like, the guessed at conclusion is TV gives a very short-term sense of good feelings, whereas, socializing or reading or other activities could give a longer term sense of good feelings.
Huh. Well, it's hard to say because I just remember I used to watch TV a lot as a kid. I'd watch The Simpsons, or I'd come home from school and I'd, dick around on the computer, but I might have the TV on in the background, or I might just sit there like eating Cheez-Its, watching something, but I haven't had TV in a long time. We had cable when we were freshmen. We never really watched it. Then we just never had cable again, and I haven't had TV since. And when I want to watch stuff, I watch it online. But I was on that business trip a couple weeks ago, and I had a TV in the room, and I turned it on to watch the election stuff, and I turned it on to try and watch some South Park, and I discovered that broadcast television is 100% unwatchable and possibly painful.
Yeah.
There's so many commercials all the time. Every time, like, all right, I'm getting into the show. Oh, it's South Park. Butters did something funny. Commercial. Okay, Butters, commercial. Butter, commercial. I couldn't deal with it.
Yeah.
I can't, but the thing is, as a kid, I could. And I don't know if it's just because I've been separated for so long that now when I watch TV, it's just this unwatchable, distracting monstrosity as opposed to actual entertainment.
Yeah, actually, what it says here is that they analyzed 2 sets of data spanning 30 years from like 30,000 adults, and they found that unhappy people watch 20% more television than very happy people, right? And that takes into account, education, income, age, marital status, blah, 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 right? All the other happy factors that they have done studies
All
on,
right, so what'll be interesting, are there other things that correlate with unhappiness?
Well, see,
like,
that's-
say, drinking, eating food when you're not hungry.
Right, no, but the thing is, I would
Surfing
like
the
to
internet.
see. I would like to see a study that compares. Are they comparing? I'd like to compare the happiness of people who watch broadcast television, people who watch television shows on DVD, people who have TiVos to not TiVos, people who watch television shows online but don't. All the different. Is it watching video for entertainment that is the cause of the unhappiness? Is it the time restrictions of broadcast television and associated extra commercials?
Maybe it's just the kind of push nature of the medium, in the sense that you hit a button and you are given this low-level entertainment constantly, but it's filled with distractions, as opposed to the active, I want to do something. I want to watch this specific show.
Yeah. I mean, I know, I've always advocated stopping watching television ever since I sort of stopped watching it like 8 years ago. But it's actually one thing that's kind of weird is that when you stop watching television, right, there are still some things, very few things, but some things that, you want to see, right? And sort of like when you have television, which is something that most people, at least in this country, have, those things don't feel like they have a lot of value, right? Like watching the news doesn't, video news doesn't seem to have a lot of value. But if you don't have a television, for some reason, suddenly that has value to it. And like if you put video news online, it's suddenly at least a little tiny bit valuable. And it's so, one thing I noticed is the biggest thing that I miss from, in fact, the only thing I miss from television,
Sports?
is live sports. Because sports are no good if they're not live, right? It's like, why would you watch a sporting event the day after when you already know the result? It's sort of blah.
There's always that guy who will tape it, but because he couldn't watch it, then he tries to not be spoiled as to what happened, and then he watches it after the fact.
Yeah, that's sort of blah, right? And actually, the NHL one year put all their games on Google Video, and that was pretty hot, but it wasn't live. And like Major League Baseball will charge you like a fortune to watch, and you can actually pay money to pretty much every major sports league to watch and or listen to games online.
Hey, didn't you pay that bootleg place?
Well, I'm going to tell you that's something different. I was just checking what the deal was with that.
Checking what the deal was to watch a bunch of...
But that you can pay a lot of money and they'll let you watch and listen online, but they don't give you your local games. So it's like, what the fuck's the point? I don't want to watch fucking, games from across the other side of the country. I want to watch the New York games. No, you can't watch those. You got to get, because they don't want to compete with the cable or whatever.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, look, even South Park, they put everything online all the time, but the last 5 or 6 episodes will always have a notice like, hey, we can't stream this episode until X date due to pre-existing contractual obligations. Local affiliates, advertisers, all that stuff.
Yeah, but if you use, if you go, it's only the only restriction to that is like on their website.
Yes.
So if you know how to get the Flash video, you can just watch it. Even though there's a
little known
restriction.
secret. You can watch any South Park episode, even the newest ones. We've been watching them on the South Park website.
Yeah.
I would suspect it's at least partly intentional.
Yeah. No, but actually, one thing is interesting is like NBC does Sunday Night Football. And you can watch it online for free, and it's actually a better experience than regular TV. I mean, the only thing wrong with it is that they do have commercials whenever the TV has commercials, but it's the same commercials over and over again. And since it's on your computer, right, you can actually switch to there's 5 angles you can watch. So during the commercials, you can actually still watch the game and just mute, and then it's effectively no commercials. However, if you change the angles too much, like if you just sit there and go angle, and change them like crazy, it'll stop you from watching and force you to watch a commercial of some variety. But it's really like not too bad, and it sort of makes you more interested in football. So I really think that like anyone who makes it's like whatever sport makes their stuff available online more easily, I find myself like having more interest in that sport. Like when I was able to download torrents of F1 races, I was into F1 more. And then when they put hockey on Google Video, I was into that more. And now that football, I can watch, at least one game a week. I'm into that a little more. It's like
with hockey, at least, imagine this. I mean, my ideal hockey would be if I have my widescreen, monitor and I'm sitting here, if I could have multiple simultaneous views, have like the full rink view and then the zoomed in puck view and then the, back end defense field view. Because, when you're watching hockey, you always tell the people who haven't seen a lot of hockey games because they're always kind of just always following the puck. But the people who watch a lot of hockey, you see a lot of times they're looking back at the defense instead of where the puck is because they know you get a sense of where like the important thing is about to happen. But TV hockey never lets you do that. It's always going right at the puck.
Well, that's one thing that actually HD TV, for all its sort of problems, people not hooking it up, it's being kind of silly for a lot of things, right? For sports, HD TV is amazing. Like,
hands down.
Not just because the image quality is better, but because you can just see that much more of what's going on. Most sporting arenas are wide things. Baseball is, I guess, a little different, but football, soccer, basketball, hockey, right? It's all a rectangle, right? So watching it in a square, you're missing the action. But with an HD TV widescreen picture and the 16:9 aspect ratio, you can see more of what's going on, and it's, far superior.
Yeah, but I still can't always look where I want to look. I mean, ideally, I want one of those.
I guess you can't look at the goalie on the other end of the ice.
I mean,
while the puck is in this zone.
I guess I want one of those little monitor bug buzzers from Hyperion. And I can just kind of float around the hockey rink and look wherever I want.
Yeah, I'm just going to put this little news story about TV making people unhappy in my argue against TV ammo box. And anyone out there who still watches TV, the old-fashioned way, what's wrong with you?
But it is really difficult because is it the cause or the effect? Is it that people who are already unhappy are looking for low-level stimulation to distract them? Or is it people who are otherwise happy become unhappy because they are experiencing this low-level constant stimulation?
Yeah, it's a difficult one to say.
And does the constant low-level stimulation of poking around Fark have the same effect?
That's why I stopped doing that too.
Or is it the same effect?
Who knows?
The shadow knows.
Yeah. The thing is, it says here at the end of the Slashdot summary at least, that TV can become a kind of opiate. It's habitual, and tuning in can be an easy way of tuning out. So whether, it's because you're unhappy.
I could say that about natural selection.
You could. But whether your TV watching is, because you're unhappy, or you are, the TV watching is making you unhappy, stopping watching the TV, even if it's not the cause of your unhappiness, will force you to face your unhappiness rather than escape from it, and thus will put you in a situation where you are able to, fight against it instead of just run away from it. And if the TV is the cause of your unhappiness, then stop watching it will make you happy. So either way, stop watching less TV is going to help you out.
See, I don't know. I'd go one step further and say that the key is to don't do passive things and only do active things when you're unhappy. Like if you're unhappy, don't do the passive default. Don't come home and turn on the TV. Don't come home and read your forum and go to Fark and then log on to your Laconica and read all your tweets. Just always do something active. Do something that requires you to take a conscious effort with a conscious goal.
Yeah, whatever you are doing, you should be doing it intentionally, and you should think about, before you do anything, think about, I'm going to do X, and then do it.
That's exactly what the fourth way says before it tells you the moon is going to eat your soul.
Yeah. It's like you'll come home, and you'll just automatically watch TV without even, there's no conscious thought behind it. It's all like an unconscious. You just naturally sit down on the couch and push the button.
Kind of like when we were at RIT, and whenever there was a couple times where the internet went out. And I remember we'd all be sitting around, the way our apartment was laid out, Scott and I had our computers in the living room, just next to each other on two different desks. And then the couches kind of ring the rest of the room, and the rest of the crew would kind of sit in a ring. And we'd poke at the computer and talk, and the computers would always be kind of central to what we were all doing. Whenever the computers were down, whenever the internet wasn't working, we'd just be sitting there, I'd just be sitting in my chair facing away from the computer like nothing's up. And someone would say something, and naturally, I would just turn around and just start clicking on Firefox like it's going to do something.
Yeah, because it's just you have this natural, unthinking reflex. But if you were all your actions were intentional, if you were thinking, I will search for that on the internet, then you would realize the internet is down, and you wouldn't do that useless thing.
Even better was the time the power was out, and I remember thinking, crap, I can't play Tribes 2.
Let me go find out how long this power is going to be out. Let me go to the power company's website.
Even worse was later. I was like, I'm hungry. I'll order pizza. And I went straight for the web.
Yep.
And it took me, I actually sat down in front of my desk and like reached for the mouse. I didn't actually touch the mouse, but I reached for the mouse before I realized that the computer wasn't even on. The lights weren't even on. There was no way this was going to work.
Anyway, what's the news over there?
There's this article here on Slashdot saying, I'll just read the headline. Open Office is 5 times more popular than Google Docs.
That's all. It's been around longer. It has a lot more features. You know, you're getting a lot more for the same price.
Well, people are acting...
Google doesn't really advertise Google Docs, but Open Office sort of gets around.
Well, the thing is, people are really getting worked up about this, and there's a giant argument in Slashdot.
What's to get worked up about? They're different things.
Slashdot, they get worked up about everything.
All right.
But, I don't know, people seem to be acting as though Open Office is somehow beating Google Docs, and I think I agree with you that they're two different things. Like
beating.
Well, beating.
Okay.
Doing better than.
Sure. All right. And then what if it is? Even if we're not going to make the argument that they're different things.
Scott,
so what?
These are open source people. I mean, these are the people who have giant campaigns to make sure Firefox or Opera gets downloaded more times than some other browser.
No.
But
all right, go on.
I don't know, just even like analysts and industry people, they're always trying to figure out what's going on. I mean, the cloud and online apps are the future, but yet clouds and online apps, while they're popular among certain segments, are not as popular among the masses. And most people will, like in Office software, most people will use Office software on their local PC rather than going online and using Google Docs. And I think part of that is just that local software, in most cases, is still better, performs better, more useful, more reliable than cloud.
See, I think really, right, the reason Google has a lot of other things besides Google search, right? But Google search continues to dominate. And even though, Gmail is their probably second most popular thing, right, is still actually used a lot less than, say, Yahoo Mail or Hotmail or those sorts of things. And you wonder, like, how is Google falling behind? Gmail is just better. And as soon as you get someone to use Gmail, they go, oh, yeah, it is just better. Why was I using stupid Yahoo Mail? And you know what I think the difference is?
Nah.
If you go to google.com, right, what do you see? You see the word Google and you see the search box. And in the top left, they have little links, and one of the links up there is for Gmail, but all it says is Gmail, right? But if you go to yahoo.com, right, it's exploding all over the place with all this stuff like, oh my God's mail, oh my God's messenger, oh my God's all this, weathers and planet. And
I think this is very intentional.
That's because
on
Google doesn't tell people about its shit. It doesn't push it. It only pushes the brand of Google itself.
I'm saying
it doesn't push its apps. No wonder no one uses them.
I think this is very intentional on Google's part because all these apps are kind of like a lot of the things Google has. They're more experiments than products, and they're trying to get these things to a state that are more workable, or trying to develop them, or just having them there so they have a presence in that market, even if they don't do anything with it right away. But I think the reason they're very subdued when they kind of advertise or talk about a lot of these things is that they only want people using them who are at least reasonably tech savvy. People who use Google Docs, by and large, are people who knew about it anyway, as opposed to people who are kind of told about it by Google, like, hey, come use the docs. It's awesome, like Yahoo does. Because that means that while it's still this beta and while it's still not fully featured, I mean, Google Docs lacks enough functionality to where the average person who's used to Microsoft Word or Open Office would find it 100% unusable.
Yeah, I mean, even today, I was trying to do some stuff with Google Docs, and it was giving me some guff, so I resorted back to using Open Office and also Numeric and Abbey Word and those sorts of things.
Even worse is Google Gears. I mean, basically, it just doesn't work. Like,
what do you mean? Google Gears works great for me.
For
the
Docs,
thing is,
you can't make
for
a new
yes. In combination with Docs.
Yes. No, I'm not just talking about Google Gears out of the blue. it is good, but the way it is used with Google Docs is so useless that it's useless.
Yeah, it's not really good. I mean, Google Gears is very good for, sites enabling offline. For example, Remember the Milk uses it very well. You can use your to-do list while you got your laptop offline, and then when you go back online, it'll sync whatever you did up, and it's perfect, And Google Gears makes offline web apps work. But Google Docs, because of, the limitations of, Google Docs is a very, very complex JavaScript program, and Google Gears can only offline so much. So if you take your Google Docs offline, it works, but it's even more limited than Google Docs already is, to the point at which it's really only good for read-only and not much else.
Yep, and of course, Microsoft has their foray into these online apps, and we're going to see Open Office, we're going to see Microsoft Office Online eventually for the masses. And I guess the question will be, if that is fully featured, as opposed to Google Docs, which is basically minimally featured, then I could see it getting a lot of use.
Yeah, it really, it depends. Are they going to build it on that Silverlight, I think, right? Or who knows what they're going to build it on?
I'll admit I've kind of ignored it because I have Office at work for doing that sort of stuff, and I found more and more in my normal life, I don't need an Office suite anymore. Like, it used to, it's weird. It used to be I needed an Office suite to do stuff, to word process.
Think about it. A computer used to be a glorified word processor.
Nah, but, I used them a lot to write papers, to do, data analysis for classes and stuff, and I did a lot of things in Office because that was the easiest way to do it at the time, but just as we've gotten to the point where there are Office apps online, I use word processing software and spreadsheet software less and less. Now, if I need to store data, I whip up a quick little database. If I need to do word processing, I just write the text, then I format it later into a PDF or something.
Yeah, well, I think what it is that, the Office suite, right, used to be like, here's the tool that will do all these things, and for many people, right, for normal everyday people who don't know how to use, these other tools, the Office suite still is, the business for them. But for someone like me, right, a lot of the stuff that, I would use a spreadsheet for, right, I will use an actual MySQL, the database, for reals. And I don't really do a lot, all my finances I do with, new cash. So I don't really need a finance spreadsheet, and I don't do a lot of, businessy money tracking stuff, so I don't really need the mathematical features of a spreadsheet that much. And when I do need math, I use a calculator, and if I do any work, typing, it's in a text editor, and I don't really have to format letters. I mostly format emails. So most of my formatting is done either, web pages, which is CSS and such, or emails, and which is also HTML. And there's no real reason for me to do formatting of documents for paper anymore. So a word processor is no better than a text editor of any other kind.
Yeah, I mean, even at work, all the documentation I write is, in a wiki.
Yeah. So what do I need a word processor for? I type in a text box in a web browser, not in a word processor. And, all these things of people, the Office suite is sort of an old thing that was a way for people to do the work of, he took the real world metaphors of old on paper technology and put them in the technology in a computer. And now we have new metaphors that are not dependent on old ways of things. A spreadsheet was pretty much, it basically copied the way that
an old ledger book.
Yeah, a ledger book. And now the idea of a ledger book is, gone. Now we just do things, with a form, and you fill out the form, and then it does the processing in the background and then gives you a report. Forms and reports have replaced the ledger book. So what do you need the spreadsheet for anymore?
Yep. Now, it's interesting because I feel like in the Office settings, Microsoft is going to do very well with this because people still need these things just because of the way businesses work in the United States or in the world. You still need an Office suite if you work in most offices.
Yeah, just because the way the people think and still do work, but as those people go away and new people come in, eventually it'll go out.
But outside of the I don't think it'll be anytime soon. So I think Microsoft will do well.
They got a long time to go.
Outside of the Office, I feel like, I don't know if they expect this or not, but they're missing the boat because the boat is no longer taking the Office suite that exists and putting it online. The boat is replacing the Office suite with a bunch of individual tools online that do the specific things people in the real world, outside of the business world, want to do with their computers, like remember stuff and track their finances.
Yep. It's not like the giving of a general tool, right? What is not going to work? Because think about it, a spreadsheet is a very general tool, and a lot of times it's so general that it's actually misused. People put databases in them when they shouldn't, and it actually makes work less efficient, and you get all these problems. But the real way for most people, don't need these general tools, and they're much better served by specific tools that do the exact task that they want to do and nothing else. And thus, the specific thing they want to do is done more efficiently, and they don't have to invest in learning this general tool and working it to get it to do the specific things they want to do, because it has the power to do these other things they don't want to do.
So, things of the day. Before I'm going to head off the inevitable scotting, but watches are obsolete. Yes, I agree.
Yep.
Okay. But
I got watches.
However, I like watches. In fact, an RIT for the longest time, for most of my life, because I didn't own a cell phone, at least not a cell phone like a modern cell phone that had a clock in it I could look at. I needed a watch. I needed some way to know what time it was when I wasn't at my computer or in my house, because there really aren't clocks in public in most places.
Mm-hmm.
So I never really wore a watch after middle school because I always thought they were uncomfortable, and I never really liked the way they looked. I don't know. I've always found the style of wearing a watch this just archaic and obsolete and uncomfortable thing.
So I always got like Timex watches because I wanted to have like the stopwatch and other things on there, and I actually sort of used them. But I always also lost them because they were uncomfortable, so I would take them off when I did things, and then I'd leave them places and I wouldn't put them back on. And so it's like eventually I was just like, screw it. And as soon as I got a cell phone, I stopped with the watches.
Yep, but in high school, before I had a cell phone, what I did is I ended up switching to the pocket watch. That way it wasn't uncomfortable. It was just in my pocket on a little chain. And yet it was, instead of, always knowing what time it is, I had the ability to find out what time it was without being forced to always know what time it was.
But if you're going to use a pocket, see, at least with a wristwatch, right, in defense of it, it's really quick. You just go, and you see the time. Like, right? You don't even have to use your hands. But with a pocket watch, you have to go into your pocket and take it out and open it and look at it, right?
Yeah, just like with the cell phone.
Just like with a cell phone. You reach into your pocket, you get it. So a cell phone is the same efficiency as a pocket watch.
Yes, I very clearly said I used a pocket watch before I owned a cell phone.
Yep. But a wristwatch does have a tiny bit of efficiency over both of those.
If you need to know what time it is all the time constantly and can't keep... I don't know, but
exactly what I was about to say.
I don't need that. I can tell what time it is. I look at my watch or my cell phone. Oh, it's 4:25. And then, when it's 5, I kind of just know because it's been about a half hour after I look at my pocket watch.
Yeah.
But regardless, I do like cool watches. I like looking at watch works. I like the gears.
Yeah,
that is
something. Like, as much as I think owning a watch or wearing a watch is sort of a waste, especially considering how much watches cost, at least cool ones, right? Anyone you'd want to have is too expensive to be worth it. Cool watches are still cool just for their, the way they work, and the mechanical nature or their electronic features or the clever way they just, clever ways of displaying the time other than, a minute hand and a second hand or a digital readout. They're all very geeky and get geeky people excited, even if owning one is a waste.
Yep, and plus I still wear pocket watches, not when I'm, in my daily life, but I wear them when I wear formal wear because there's a place to put a pocket watch if you're wearing a 3-piece suit.
No, it's no different than wearing any other, piece of jewelry. The usefulness of it doesn't come into play. It's the, the look of it.
It's I don't think you understand how useful it is to be able to pull out a pocket watch and say, "Oh my, it's 4:30."
I can do that. I just pull out an iPhone and go, "Oh my, it's 4:30."
It doesn't quite have the same effect.
Why not?
Anyway, I stumbled upon this watch, and I would argue that it's the coolest wristwatch I've ever seen.
I don't know about that.
I don't know. It's got a really almost steampunky front to it. And the colors are just exactly what I want.
There are plenty of steampunk watches out there.
I know, but of all the steampunk ones, this one seems like the most practical while still retaining the most steampunkness. I mean, I've seen some awesome steampunk watches that are probably like 20 pounds. And I've seen some that, they're awesome, but how do you know what time it is? But this one looks like it actually works. And I think the pictures here are really cool. But here's why I don't understand watches and why I kind of think they're dumb in the end. I would buy this watch, actually, if it was a reasonable price, because I think with certain dress, it would look really good. And I could see being willing to wear a watch despite it being uncomfortable just because the style is something I like. However, it is $64,000.
Yeah, for that money, I could buy like 3 cars.
I could buy 12 of my current car.
You know what? You know how many completely, other things that tell time nearly as well that I could buy?
You know how many iPhones I could buy?
All of them.
I don't know. Maybe I should look for a bootleg.
And you know what? The iPhone does a lot more than that watch, which just tells time.
One thing the iPhone does not do is look steampunk.
You could easily pay the best steampunk modder in the world to steampunk mod your iPhone
for less than
a lot less than
$64,000.
$64,000.
I feel like I should look for a bootleg site and see if I can get one of these things on the cheap.
I mean, you can just look at the design, and take a metalworking class, which costs less than $64,000. Get some metalworking tools, which also cost less than $64,000, and then make one and get a watch mechanism, and you'll be good to go. And you know what? A lot less than $64,000. Probably a lot less than $10,000.
The reason I found out about this watch, though, apparently there's been one of those fake...
Even if you factor in the amount of time it takes you.
There's been one of those fake kind of PR pushes where I saw a bunch of articles in different news sources talking about how to spot a bootleg Rolex or a fake, all these fancy watches, how to spot the fake ones.
Who cares?
How you definitely don't want to get ripped off and you really want to get the real one. And I have a feeling that there's some sort of effort behind the scenes trying to convince people in this bad economy where they're definitely not going to be buying these luxury items like they might in the past, to not buy the bootlegs and to spend the valuable, the money on the valuable real Rolex instead of the identical but $20 Folex.
Yeah, I really don't understand. Like, why would you, if there's a Rolex and there's an identical watch, it's identical in every way except the R is slightly crooked to, for whatever reason. Or even maybe it's a real fake Rolex. It actually says Rolex, right? What the fuck do you care if it was actually made by the Rolex company or by some guy in Chinatown? Does it tell time? Yes. Does it work? Yes. It's a lot cheaper. What the fuck's the difference? Who cares?
Well,
Who cares?
It's like the difference between wearing a fake diamond and a real diamond.
Well, the fake diamond is shinier. It's better and cheaper. Why would you wear the real one?
If it's fake, it's actually not shinier.
Well, if it's a real diamond, but is manufactured by humans as opposed to by the Earth.
But then it's a real diamond. I said fake diamond, as in cubic zirconia.
Cubic zirconia can be pretty shiny.
Not as shiny as a diamond.
Why not?
Refractive index, it can't be.
Who can tell the difference? Not most people.
You can tell with the cubic zirconia pretty easily.
We'll have to do some tests.
I'm just saying that there are
most people can't tell an HDTV from a regular one.
I'm just saying that there are people who can tell, and if you care about that sort of thing, then you probably got to spend the money.
But why care? That's the question. Not do you care, but why?
Maybe it's a status symbol. I want to, if I have billions of dollars, I want to show off. Look, I've got the fancy watch. This cost more than a small country.
You know what shows off a lot more than a fancy watch? $1 billion. Just show me your bank statement, dude. You don't need to show, if you show me a bank statement of $1 billion, I'll actually be impressed. If you show me that you're someone who has $1 billion, but you're so dumb that you spent it on a stupid watch, I'm going to be less impressed. In fact, I will look down on you instead of up.
I don't know, Scott. I find it silly that people might spend that much money on a watch, but I don't find it quite as horrible as you seem to.
It's pretty stupid.
It's not that bad. There are worse things in the world.
Yeah, someone who bought the $120,000 watch.
Anyway, so what do you have for me?
Okay, so check this out. Do you remember way back in the day, there was the MP3 listening test? Or not? Do you remember that?
No.
Basically what they did is they took all the different MP3 encoders, right? And they encoded a 128-bit kilobit per second VBR file, right? The same file with every encoder. Well, and they put the audio out there for you to listen to. And you go and you listen to them and you say which one you thought was best. And, they're trying to figure out, which MP3 encoder is the best at the same quality settings. And, it's pretty cool. You go and you listen to the audio and you say, that one sounds the best. And then in the end, people are going to figure out, should we be encoding our MP3s with LAME? Should we be encoding them with Fraunhofer? Should we be encoding them with iTunes? What should we be encoding them with?
Well, if I recall studies I've seen in the past, I don't know if they were that one in particular, I remember that the differences pretty much disappeared if you just used a higher bit rate.
Well, that's of course true, but that's why they're only doing it for the 128 kilobit VBR, because the goal of it, the point is, if you want good audio quality, right, actually good, you're not going to use an MP3 at 128 kilobits, and it doesn't matter what encoder you use. It just, the point of an MP3 is that you care about saving space. You want a smaller file, but you still want the audio to be...
But the size difference between a 320 to, 60 VBR versus a 192 to 60 VBR is not that much compared to the difference between an MP3 and a wave. So I'm already saving the majority of the space anyway. It's just, it's limited returns beyond that point.
Yeah, but, there are people out there who really want to save space and, they care about this kind of thing and whatever. And so you can go here and you can take this MP3 listening test and say which one you think sounds better than the others. The only thing is I'm not sure if this is like double blind or not. Well, I guess it can't. It'd just be blind, right? It's like, do they tell you which one you're listening to? Because if they do, that's no good.
Well, then it's not blind at all. But
yeah.
Well, if you do, I guess you haven't done it then.
Okay, no, let's see. I'm checking it out right now. Actually, I'm opening up the thing.
Because as long as they randomize, the order they give them to you, then the computer itself is, I guess, blind because it can't influence you. The reason we have double blind is so that the researcher can't influence your decision.
Yeah, okay. So
subconsciously.
It does look like it is blind, and there's actually a Java application that you run and plays the things for you. So that is actually going to add answers my second question, which was, even if they're encoded by different encoders, right? If I play one in Winamp and another guy plays one in iTunes, there's a different decoder and is doing different post-processing to the audio, and the sound card could be doing stuff, and there could be and the speakers could be different, and there's all these other factors coming into play. But by having a Java program do the decoding and the playing and the testing, that actually solves a lot of those problems. And everyone's going to get a very, very similar listening experience with only the hardware being different. And, the hardware being different is okay because you want to see which one is the best across, all the different varying hardware out there. So, yeah, keep an eye on this. Take the test if you want. And if you're someone who encodes a lot of MP3s, then you can come back here when the test is done and figure out which encoder you should be using, and it's all good.
So tonight we're talking about the X-Men.
No, we're not. Talking about the X window system. A lot of people don't even know what the X window system is or realize, how old it is or anything. But, this could end up being a boring show, but I don't give a shit because this is something that I was excited about, and recently my excitement has been rekindled.
Huh? Right? You've been up with the foul language tonight. Wonder if it's related to your bowels.
What foul language did I use? I said rekindled. Is that bad language? Is that a bad word suddenly? No rekindling?
I don't know. It's just been a lot more than usual. You've upped the ante a little bit.
What are you saying bad words like that? So, back in the day, right, you had Unix systems, right? There was no real GUI going on. And there were lots of different people coming up with different, graphical systems. And even today on Linux and different Unixes, right, there are different graphical. I mean, Linux comes with a frame buffer, right? A kernel frame buffer. And when you start like a Linux system, you ever start like an Ubuntu system, and you see like that Ubuntu logo show up with that progress bar, right? That's the Linux kernel frame buffer doing that. When you start a Linux machine, you see the penguin up there instead of just text. That's also the kernel frame buffer doing that. That's not, any sort of actual GUI. That is that's directly accessing the video hardware in order to draw on the screen, right? But what they had back in the day, they had these Unix systems, and the Unix systems and Linux systems in particular, all right, people don't realize this, that they are multi-user systems and therefore are fundamentally different from Windows computers, right? DOS and Windows are sort of these single-user systems. It's designed, it's a PC, a personal computer. Their operating system's designed for one person to sit in front of one computer, and the computer they were sitting in front of was the actual computer, all right? Unix, Linux, and all other such Nixes, BSDs, and whatnot are multi-user systems. These were designed back in the day when you had one big computer and a bunch of people using them. Right? And that's why when you use the Linux system today, it's still a multi-user system. Everything is being done by a different user. You got the root user, you got yourself, you've got the Apache user that runs the web server, the MySQL user that runs the database server. Your friend can log into the machine while you're using it. All that stuff is going on. Windows and Mac have sort of added features for there to be multiple people who are users of the same computer. But they're not really multi-user systems. Windows, sort of has multi-user features. But
try switching from one user to another user without causing any problems in Windows 2000.
Yeah, try having like 3 different users all use the same Windows 2000 computer at the same time. It's not going to happen. But back in the day, at MIT and other such places, they had one big computer and a bunch of people using them, right?
Well, Windows Terminal Server can do that, but anyway.
That's true. But that's a thing on top of Windows. It's not part of Windows itself. It's not in the core of the operating system. Anyway, so they had that going on, but it was all terminals. They'd telnet into the mainframe, and they'd all have text terminals, just like we have a command line deal. They wanted graphics on there, but they needed the graphics to work across multiple terminals to one actual machine. And many solutions came around for this, but the solution that caught on was the X Windows system, right? And basically, the X Windows system is a way of all it really does at the core is draw bitmaps to the screen in Windows, right? So there's a root window, which is sort of like the bottom, right? It's the background, right? It's just a big flat thing, and then it has sub windows of that, and the sub windows, are rectangles, in this position or that position, and some rectangles are on top of each other, and they're in different positions, and there's a picture drawn in each rectangle, and it transmits these rectangles from the computer to the user. It's a client-server model. Like, the Windows desktop is just a thing. It's just there. Windows just draws it, right? And it's there for you. The X Windows system is a client and a server. The thing is, it's confusing to most people because it's sort of backwards. When you think of a client and a server, right, the client is what you're using, and the server is somewhere else. When you use, like, X Windows on your Linux machine, the server is what you're messing with. You're directly in on the server right there. And, the clients are sort of the things you don't see going on in the background are the X clients. You're manipulating the server right up front.
Yep. And also, just anyone who's, built a Linux, like maybe you're not used to this sort of stuff, but you decided, like, I'm going to build a Gentoo machine, or I'm going to build a Linux from scratch. And the configuration of X and the way you interact with X, if you're doing it from scratch or without something to do it for you, I'm not going to say it's archaic, because that's not really true. It's just very complex because it's a very complex system.
Yeah.
And it's one of those old Linux things. The GNU Linux people, there's a lot of, like, X is one of those software things that is developed based on principles, and there are a lot of guiding statements that cause it to be the way it is.
Yeah.
I didn't remember them all offhand. I remember learning about them at RIT, so I pulled up the Wikipedia list.
The main thing is that they don't want to do anything in X that should be done somewhere else.
Yes, but there's
and they
more
don't
than
want to do anything in X that isn't going to be used by a lot of applications.
I do want to read the guiding principles of X, because these will
they don't really stick to them so much anymore.
Yeah, but they did change one of them to break from the 1987 protocol somewhat recently. But anyway.
I'll just go over the history of X really quickly. It started out as X1, and, they kept advancing.
Then there was X2 and then
X2,
X3.
X3, X4, right? They were developing this thing, and they kept adding features and getting new versions of it. But eventually what happened is there were, Unix ran on a lot of different CPUs. It ran on Spark CPUs, DEC CPUs, all sorts of different computers. But as the 386 became, the x86 series, the Intel processors became more popular and more standard and, the winners, X386 became the version of X that sort of became the winner and the default and everything like that. But X386, while it was open source and had a sort of mostly open source license, it was, really worked on by a very insular group of people. It wasn't, sort of open for everyone to fiddle with that much as, somewhat like the Linux kernel is. And it was moving very slowly. They were very reluctantly, they were reluctant to advance it. It just was moving very slowly. They weren't adding new fancy features to it. They weren't keeping up with the times, all right? And as Linux, towards the year 2000 and such started getting really popular, the number of people using x386 sort of launched into the stratosphere. It was like, holy shit, all these people are installing Linux. There's a million x386 users out there that didn't exist before. And they're desktop users and they're looking for these features and they're just not getting them. And they have modern video cards and it's just not, x386 isn't cutting it. And so they were slowly but surely adding these things to x386 to sort of keep it up barely with the rest of the world. But eventually what happened is someone decided to change the license. The x386 people were all sort of ornery. They decided to change some stuff up. So everyone else was like, you know what? That's the end of this shit. And they said, fuck you, x386. And they took the last version of x386 that wasn't encumbered with bullshit, and they made Xorg. And if you install Linux today, Xorg is on a modern Linux, you're getting Xorg. And Xorg is basically, they said, all right, we're making this modern now with the transparency and the, everything, modern video card support.
I gotta say, when the switch happened, this was one of those things where even someone like me, because I use Linux, but I wasn't, I guess, as into Linux as other people were. I didn't mess with it as much. I kind of just had my Ubuntu and it just worked, or had my Gentoo and it didn't work, but I couldn't fix it, so I just used it anyway. But even I noticed.
Yeah, when
stuff just started working that never worked before.
Yeah, when they actually got that switch to Xorg, which happened amazingly quickly, mostly because it was backward, it was x386, they just sort of forked it.
Yeah, I mean, remember, I didn't even know this was going on, and one day I had a problem with my Gentoo box, and Scott was like, blah, 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 Xorg, and I was like, I got x386. Is that bad?
Now it is.
Yeah, so I basically rebuilt my machine, and then it was awesome.
Yeah, because basically they had all these things that just weren't being done, partially because of the guiding principles and partially because of the people in charge. And now we have Xorg, and now things are more amazing than ever. The thing is, while the things, basically all the more amazing than ever things in Xorg are things that Windows sort of has had, and Mac OS X have had, right? The things that make X better than Windows and OS X are things that X has had since the 80s. Because it's a multi-user system, a client-server, GUI model, as opposed to, the one user sitting at the PC model, there are all these networking features in X.
Like X forwarding. I mean, you couldn't do that on a Windows machine.
Yeah, when you want to say if I'm on a Windows machine and I want to use an application on another Windows machine, what do I got to do? I need an application server like Citrix. I could use
Nowadays, you can use our desktop.
You can use remote desktop. You can use VNC, something like that, right? With X, right? Every X server is an X server, and every application is, technically networked, right? So when you're sitting at your, Linux computer and you open Firefox, right? The X server is transmitting the Firefox GUI, right? To the X client. You can see it, right? There's no reason you can go use another computer, right? I can go to any other computer in the world, and if I can connect it with networking, right, over the internet to your computer, and I'm allowed to access your computer, I can run Firefox on your computer, that other computer over there, but I'll see it and interact with it on my computer
now
over here.
It's even, it's so much better than that sounds.
And they've had that feature since the 80s.
I mean, it's not like you get a window of a desktop and then inside of that is your stuff. I mean, the way I do my work typically is there's an X server we have that I SSH into that. I use X132 just because I have a Windows desktop.
Yep, so he's now connected over the network securely to the other computer.
And I have an FVWM desktop, and in that, I have a million, virtual desktops, and each one of those virtual desktops corresponds to a server. And if I go to a desktop, and then I open terminals to that server there, mostly, and the backgrounds are all different. This is just to make sure I'm logged into the right server when I do stuff, and there's a lot of reasons for it. But say I want to run, it's all command line. These are all servers. We don't have GUIs. There's no desktop running anywhere. There's no place where someone will go to the server and, oh, here's my Red Hat desktop. It's just a command line. But if I need an X application like a Verifix or something, I just type the command to start the program on the computer I'm SSH into, And the window or windows that program would have spawned just appear in my FVWM as though I had run them locally. They work as though they're local. There's absolutely no indication, no anything to tie me to that original machine.
Except for the fact that when you go to file save, it has the file systems from the other machine because the application is running on the other machine.
Well, and if I
it's just showing up and interacting with the user on your machine.
If I don't set up my persistent sessions, then if I close my terminal, I lose everything. But
no, that's also true.
But that's just those are things that you just have to do properly.
The other thing about X is that all X does, like I said, is draw these rectangles and make allow you to have windows. Close buttons, pull down menus, background wallpapers, anything like that does not exist, and it's not part of X. That's separate, right? X, when they deliver it, comes with one window manager, TWM. TWM is basically what you use when nothing else is working, just so you can sort of fix your computer, right? And I used to have to fall back to TWM all the time when X had a lot of problems. I haven't fallen back to TWM in years because there have been no problems. But TWM is, I forget, is it like Tiny Window Manager, I think?
I don't actually know.
It stands for something like that. And X is separate from window management. When you think of a GUI, you think of like, oh, look, you think of the window management, the title bar, the red, yellow, and green buttons on all the OS X windows, right?
Yep.
Resizing windows. You think that is like part of the GUI. They're together. In X, that's not so. The window manager is a separate thing, and that's why when you use different, Unix and Linux machines,
tiling window manager.
Yeah, some of them
timeless window manager.
Ooh. Some of them have KDE, some of them have GNOME, some of them have XFCE, some of them have FVWM, some of them have, Enlightenment, and they all look completely different. Like they're completely different machines. Some of them, people make them look like Windows. Some people make them look like OS X. People have, they don't even have close buttons. They only have like keyboard shortcuts to close windows.
Yep. Like at IBM, I made these Linux image desktops that would be used on the factory floor, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them all over the place. And we wanted them to be for very non-technical users. So I used IceWM because by default, it can make things look a lot like Windows 3.1, which is what they were used to. And I basically recreated the Windows 3.1 windowing environment in IceWM, and that's all independent. I didn't have to do anything with X other than to say, yes, when the computer boots, start IceWM, and IceWM had all the configuration for that stuff, and X was just X.
Yeah. The thing about X is that anything can sort of change anything, right? And I remember watching this demonstration once at RIT. A teacher demonstrated it to us, the insecurity, the fundamental insecurity of X. And basically, he opened up, a window, and it was like a text editor with some pull-down menus, right? And he opens up a terminal and he types in some, X commands, and basically he told X, right, because every window in X is an ID, right? So he said, hey, X, yeah, that window ID, do this, right? And he went back to the text editor window, which was an X window, and he went to the pull-down menu, and suddenly there were new items in the pull-down menu that weren't there before. They're not part of that application. He just, told the X server to do this thing to this window. And that's what's sort of crazy about it, is that all these windows can sort of communicate with each other, and all your applications can modify, what's going on. And this is a security layer to make sure that funny stuff doesn't happen. And, by default, it's configured properly.
Yeah, but a lot of times if you're trying to do something clever and you don't know a lot about how X is set up, you'll run into that security layer. You'll try to spawn a window in X that is owned by another user on someone else's desktop, and it'll fail and you won't know why.
Yep. But that, that security layer is only there because if you need that kind of thing to cover up this immensely powerful tool. And that immensely powerful tool is why X is so amazing. Of all the clever things that you can do with X, they had to make X security. Otherwise, you'd have people coming in and modifying all your windows, and it'd be haywire. But examples of really cool things that you can do because of this, right? Someone on another computer is, running Firefox, right? And their Firefox has a problem. All right, so you can, they're working on display 0. You connect to their computer, you connect to display 0, and you make the window that they're, working in appear on your screen. and now you can, change. You can help work with them, and you don't even need VNC or anything weird like that. It's part of the window manager. My stomach's getting all
Are
gurgly
you
again.
bowly?
A little bowly.
Bowly.
Bowly. Another example. This is what got me excited about X again. It reminded me how awesome it is. Right? Is I recently was using I knew about this tool for a long time called X2X. I just didn't use it for the longest time until recently. And what X2X does is you connect to, X servers or X displays, right? And you say, okay, X, yeah. You see that other X display over there, right? Because, connect to that, and it's on the right side. And you say, okay. So now what happens is I'm using my computer, right? And all my mouse inputs and my keyboard inputs are being sent to the X display 0 on my computer. But X2X is connected to X display 0 on my laptop. And I move my mouse off the right side of my screen, and suddenly my mouse, which is connected to my computer, a desktop computer, is moving the arrow on the laptop. The X is taking the inputs of the mouse that are coming to it, sending those inputs instead of to itself, to its own X display, is sending it to the X display on another X server. So a mouse on one computer is moving the arrow on another computer. And you don't need any sort of special application to do that. You don't need any sort of special feature. It's built in. That's how it works. It is a networked windowing system, a networked GUI. And so everything that you do between client inputs and displaying can be sent over the network this way or in reverse in the other way. And anything can modify any other thing, as long as, you're doing it securely and you have permission to do so. So all these things that people want to do all the time, which are just not possible in Windows or need a special application to make them happen, or things that were recently added to something like OS X, like virtual desktops. Virtual desktops have been in X since like the early 90s. It's like people like, oh my God, leopard spaces.
Meanwhile, Windows still doesn't have a useful virtual desktop.
Yeah, I mean, there's some add-ons that do it shittily, right? But nothing does it well.
Yeah, the power tool is great, but at work I tend to have like 20 windows open at the same time.
And it's no good.
It's fine, but when I switch desktops, it redraws all the
all it does is minimize and unminimized, right? And then adjust the taskbar. Isn't that how it works?
Well, yeah, it hides all the things in the taskbar so they don't all show up. But it's still like you see it repainting everything on the taskbar, and it takes like a second to switch between desktops.
Oh, it's terrible. It's terrible.
Even better, I have two applications that are old, and they just show up on every desktop no matter what.
Yeah. So I know everyone who has, is set up Linux or is using it, if you have a GUI, you're probably using X. I mean, there are alternatives to X, but no one's really using them. And if you're using X, there's all these features that, you're either taking advantage of without realizing it or not taking advantage of. And maybe you don't even realize you're using X. You're just thinking, I'm using Ubuntu. And you don't realize you're actually using a Linux kernel with X on top of that and GNOME on top of that. And then a bunch of modifications to all those things along the way. And maybe you'll run into X if like your video card doesn't work, and you'll have to edit the xorg.conf to change the X configuration to make your video card work. But that might be all the interaction you ever have with the X window system. And if it is, I highly encourage you to go, open up a terminal, just type X and push tab, and you'll see all these X-related commands. Or open up the xorg.conf and look at some of the settings you can change in there, and look at some of the things that are going on, and you might notice that there are things which will greatly benefit you and greatly enhance your computer using experience that you don't even realize you're not using, that are just sort of built in and have been there since the mid-'80s, and are things that other windowing systems on other computer operating systems just can't do and never will do, most likely, that you can just do like nothing. And people don't even realize it.
Now, before we go, we should wrap this up. I want to read the original guiding principles of X, because for anyone who does know the difficulties and issues that do exist with X, these pretty much sum up why all of those are the case. 1, do not add new functionality unless an implementor cannot complete a real application without it. It is as important to decide what a system is not as to decide what it is. That was kind of awkward. Do not serve all the world's needs. Rather, make the system extensible. All right? The only thing worse than generalizing from one example is generalizing from no examples.
That's true.
If a problem is not completely understood, it is probably best to not provide a solution.
Mm-hmm.
If you can get 90% of the desired functionality for 10% of the effort, use the simpler solution.
Yep.
Isolate complexity, yes. Provide mechanism rather than policy.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's why the X security is so separate, and why X, has all these crazy things that can happen, is because it provides the mechanisms to do all these things, and there's no policy as to whether you should do them or not.
Yep, and they really don't implement things willy-nilly. So someone might say, yeah, it'd be great if X just did transparency like this. But the people who are working on X would say, if we're going to do transparency at all, we're going to do it in a way that is generically beneficial to everyone and specifically aids applications that we know exist.
And that's why, right, think all the fancy, gooey, eye candy stuff actually is in Compiz Fusion, which is what they call it now, and the composite extension to X. It's not part of X, it's an extension you add on to X.
Which is
get all that
exactly
extra
the way
stuff going on.
it was intended to be developed.
Yep.
If you want to do something crazy that doesn't have wide applicability outside of your specific application, your specific stuff, you're better off extending X for that rather than forcing everyone else to have this extra complexity added to the X, which is the base for everything.
And that's the other thing that's amazing about X, is that any application that, works in the GUI, right, suddenly has all these X features added onto it because they're not application specific. It's just generalized. Everything's at the lowest level. So, they made Firefox. So people making Firefox didn't think about running Firefox onto a remote machine or anything like that. They didn't have to think about it at all. But because if you run Firefox in Linux in X, suddenly it has all the features of X you can do to Firefox. You can do them all to any X application. All these things just suddenly work perfectly. No questions asked. No extra programming on the part of the application developer necessary. It all just happens, and you can accomplish amazing feats. And it's worth your time to investigate those amazing feats.
This has been Geeknights with Rim and Scott. Special thanks to DJ Pretzel for the opening music.
Be sure to visit our website at www.frontrowcrew.com, where you'll find show notes, links, our awesome forum, a link to our Frapper map, and links to all the RSS feeds.
We say feeds plural because Geeknights airs 4 nights a week, covering 4 different brands of geekery. Mondays are science and technology. Tuesdays, we have video games, board games, and RPGs. Wednesdays are anime, manga, comic nights. And Thursdays are the catch-alls for various rants and tomfoolery.
You can send us feedback by email to geeknights@frontrowcrew.com. Or you can send audio feedback via Odeo. Just click the link that says Send Me an Audio on the right side of our website.
If you like what you hear, you can catch the last 100 episodes in iTunes or in your favorite podcatcher. For the complete archives, visit the website, which has everything.
Geeknights is distributed under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share-alike 2.5 license. This means you can do whatever you want with it as long as you give us credit, don't make money, and share it in kind. Geeknights is recorded live with no studio and no audience. But unlike those other late shows, it's actually recorded at night.